Here we go. Let's do this.
We've got one life, one shot. Who do you want to be? What do you want to do? Addicted to Betterment, a podcast to inspire us to keep going, to try something new, to dream, to think big, bigger, to overcome. Here we go. Here we go. Here we go.
Man, today's episode is going to be one for the books. Sometimes you have those conversations with someone that they feel like they could go for days. And I'm on today with my friend Steve Perkins, the founder, CEO of Greenhouse Coaching. Steve, I hope you didn't drink an energy drink before this show today, because I know every time you and I get talking, oh no, he's got the energy drink with him. We're in trouble, folks. Man, Steve, welcome to the show today. I'm really excited to dive in. Just fill me in on how things are going in your world, man.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me on. This is so exciting because you recently recorded with me for our podcast and I started listening to yours, and I'm a huge fan already. And I can just imagine what pretty much everyone who listens to your podcast is thinking or wrestling with or energized by. So yeah, I'm really glad to be talking with you.
Well, I tell you, the first time we met virtually, I'll never forget this. I got off our call, and my energy level, if I started out as a 6 or 7, when we got off, I was at a 12. And I'm like, man, that guy, your energy and fire and passion, it's infectious. And I can imagine those around you. And it's always inspiring when I get to talk to you. And one of the things I want to dive into, I was thinking about this show today, is your career. So you have an awesome podcast, The Career Sweet Spot. By the way, folks, if you're not listening to The Career Sweet Spot, I promise you won't regret it if you do. Man, engaging content that I'm sure you will be fired up after this show today to check it out. So please do that. But I want to dive into a second to talk about Greenhouse, your business, but more than that, one of the things I connected with you on is your passion for just leveling up in life. So here at Addicted to Betterment, we have this practice called the life wheel. Man, me and you got into a big conversation about that right out of the gate. And we have this passionate belief that in every area of life, you can consistently level up, get better, achieve more success, a more fulfilling life. And you and I connected on that right away. And your story not only inspired me, but kind of challenged me. And that's kind of where I want to start with. So just give us a snapshot of your career, what led you to some big changes, and where you're at now.
Yeah. I mean, for me, it started with always wondering as a kid, like, what do I want to be when I grow up? And having zero clue the answer to that question. And so, the arc of my story has always been that. And now I help people figure that out all the time, because I was kind of frustrated along the way that it seems like there weren't people or a process or a tool out there to help you figure it out. I mean, come to find out, there are things out there. I didn't know about them, but it energizes me to get the word out and to help more people with that. But yeah, so I mean, I always loved as a kid, like fire pit conversations about life and dreaming about the future. And I love to tinker and invent stuff or tinker with things. And so it was like, okay, well, you get kind of close to college. What are you going to go to college for? No one really, I didn't know. No one knew what to tell me. My parents were like, well, you kind of like inventing stuff and you're decent at math and science. So how about engineering? Because that's, a very stable, like good career path. Okay. So fast forward, and after college, I'm doing the engineering thing. And I just all along through college into career, I was like, this isn't it. This is not the thing for me. Something's missing. And I hesitate sometimes to say this part because it doesn't resonate with everyone, but I guarantee, I know it'll resonate with your listeners. I would leave work many days, kind of working in the Fortune 500. Like at the time I was working at Capital One, big corporate setting. And I would leave work and every day I had the same thought driving home. I was like, man, I feel like I only gave 20% of what I have to give today. And I know there's so much more. And it sounds arrogant to say like, oh, I have a job that most of the world would dream of having, and it's still not enough. And it wasn't that. It was like purpose and impact. I'm not really using what I'm made to do. And so it just got to a tipping point where I was like, I got to figure this out and I got to make a big shift. And so I started piecing together like personality tests and talking to different mentors and trying to figure out like, what is my purpose in career? And all of those things helped. And I started kind of creating a process as I did it and testing it out with friends like, hey, try this, here's some questions or some things to think about. But a lot of like personality tests, you do it and you get the results and you're like, okay, now what do I do with this? It's still kind of a dead end. How does it translate to a job or a career? But I knew I was always entrepreneurial. I always like to build things and dreamt of, having a business one day. But that just seemed like way out of reach. I mean, no one in my family had done that. I had done this stable path. Here I am with like the job that, my parents and me, and like we worked to get here. I can't just ditch it. You've got the cushy salary and benefits. Why would you leave that? And yeah, I just knew it wasn't the right thing for me. I felt very much boxed in many days. Like, okay, just come and do this job. And I always had ideas, or I was good at connecting with people, and you couldn't do that stuff. Like, just sit down and do your job. It's like, no, I'm good at creating new opportunity and building a team and building a vision. And so it got to a point where I knew like it's time to leave, but I don't know what kind of business to start. And so a bunch of things kind of happened, but one of them was I was meeting these coaches, and they were executive coaches at Capital One, kind of for the top level leaders. And they said, Steve, you should be a coach. Like, you're made to do this. I'm like, what is coach? I was like, I'm not really a therapist. Like, I'm more of a business minded person. So no, thanks. And thankful for them. Like, they kept pushing. They're like, no, you need to check this out. Okay, fine. So put that to the side. At the same time, the company wanted to kind of rejuvenate their culture, and they were picking up things like agile and design thinking and all these, hip new methodologies. And I was like, hey, can I start a culture team? Because I get how this stuff works. Like, we're saying, hey, you should collaborate, but teams are basically judged on how they do better than their peers on the team. It's like there's just underlying culture that's not working. And they all looked at me sideways until I met this leader who was like, yeah, go for it. So he gave me a chance to be like an entrepreneur and kind of step into this entrepreneurship while I was still in the safety net of this big company. So I got to build a team and build products, and we were doing it. And through those two experiences, kind of starting to dabble in executive coaching school, doing some culture work, I was like, whoa, this is the thing. I still don't know what the business or job would be, but this is the thing.
Steve, I got a question for you right there. This is awesome. And as you're talking, I feel like so many people can relate to that struggle that you're describing of, man, I got a good job. It pays me well. It's not, I'll use the word fulfilling me. I find this gap. I have more. I can give more. I want to do more in this lack of purpose. So I want to back up on that for just a second. So you're married, kids. So I'm wondering, what role did, man, I got a wife and I have a kid, I have responsibility. What role did that play in the struggle of, man, I can't step out, take a risk because I got a wife and kids, and I can't do something different because this is great where I'm at. Describe that struggle that you were experiencing.
No, I'm glad you push on that, because that was a huge struggle. And in my excitement, sometimes I even just forget about that part of the story. But so for me, it was two things. You're kind of hitting on them. One was fear of the unknown and stepping out into this big unknown. But I'm entrepreneurial enough in nature. That wasn't really the roadblock for me. I was excited and energized to go after that challenge. The bigger roadblock for me was the second thing, which was the fear of letting down the people around me. And what that looked like for me in that time was, hey, my parents, like, they didn't get to go to college really. They worked really hard and created these amazing opportunities to get me where I'm at. I can't just tell them I'm ditching it all. Like, they'll disown me. Then there was the bigger fear of, well, my wife's going to think I'm nuts and be like, see ya. We need stable income and we've got, yeah, house and baby and all these responsibilities. And by the way, she had just, for a number of reasons, she had just stopped working. And so here I am wanting to make this shift when we have no other income. And now looking back, I've grown a lot since then. I'm a lot better at opening up and telling people in my life what I'm thinking, what I'm wrestling with. But at the time, I kept it all in. Like, I never even told anyone in my life that I dreamt of being an entrepreneur. I mean, I was terrified to even tell people about those thoughts because it seemed so like bogus.
Man, Steve, I feel like what you're saying resonates with so many. So maybe for some, it's not the dream of being an entrepreneur. Maybe it's not starting my own business, but most of us in some area of our life want more, feel like we have more, and want to do the thing. And there's this fear of all whatever it is that holds us back. And what I heard you say was the fear of others' expectations of letting people down. And that can be a real, it's not made up. That's a real thing. We have people in our lives that we're responsible to and are counting on us to do well. And so, man, I'm really glad you shared that, because so many times, we say on our show, take the action, do the thing, go for it. And the reality is that's a lot easier to sit here and say while we're on a podcast. And so, sharing the reality of that fear, because I feel like that is where so many people get stuck, is in this idea phase. And then all the what ifs pop in our head. What if this doesn't go as I hope it does? And obviously you're a talented, very smart guy, and what you're doing is awesome. But I knew that there had to be some level of that where the fear could be paralyzing. What helped you get past that? What helped you say, man, the risk is worth it. I'm going for it.
I mean, it took a long time, first of all. I'm glad you used the word paralyzing. It was crippling to me. Um, and it's why I like to share that nuanced part of it, because the easy things to say are, yeah, fear of, will the business work? And can I make enough money? And will anyone buy this? Like, that's the obvious fears. But I think you're right. Like, the part that gets dismissed is actually the internal, more psychological fears of, well, what are other people going to think in my life? And that was the crippling part to me. If it was just me and I had no connection to anyone, I would have just like up and left and tried it. But um, I guess this is kind of I don't know, it might be a little funny what got us over the hump. Because it took me a long time to work up the courage to share with her. I had been meeting with a mentor for breakfast like every week for a while, and he had run a few businesses. His name's Tommy Thompson. He has a great podcast called Space for Life, by the way, plug for him. But we had this one breakfast where he had been walking me through some steps to get clear on my life mission. And I was just given a lot of, like, I tend to overthink stuff and I have lots of thoughts and I can't distill them. And he had kind of listened for a while and he leans over. I'll never forget at the moment. He leans over the table and he goes, Steve, kind of looking me right in the eye. He's like, I bet you if you could help the people you love the most in your life figure out what they are meant to do, that would probably just light you up and give you so much fulfillment. And I just started tearing up. Like, I just was stunned. I was kind of like sitting there still and just tears started kind of welling up. I still do, thinking about it, because it was so deep and core to to my purpose. Like, and that I always tell clients now, like, when it gets emotional, that's when you're hitting on something. Because we kind of laughed after that. Tommy and I were like, well, that was funny. Like, where did that emotion come from? I mean, he was like pressing into something so core to who I am that it was emotional to think about. And so I give him a lot of credit of like, some of those moments started to give me courage. Like, okay, I got to talk to Ashley about this. I have no idea how. I'm scared as hell to bring it up, but I got to do it. And so one day I'm like, okay, I got my plan ready. I had the numbers like in this spreadsheet because I'm an engineer. And I'm like, all right, I got to show you this thing. I've got this idea and I'm all ready to show her like it's a real idea. It's going to work. And this isn't a knock against her. I'll explain it in a minute, but basically like took one look at the spreadsheet and just got angry at me. And it just turned into an all-out fight. And every time we tried this, we would get in a fight. And looking back, we laugh because we've done a lot of like marriage counseling and learned each other more. Well, she gets overwhelmed by spreadsheets and she's already somebody who has a lot of anxiety. So when something like that hits her, it just kind of flips the lid. Meanwhile, what she wanted was like, could you take a piece of paper and a pen and just jot down the number, like a few numbers, like give me the high level. And I wasn't doing it the way she needed. And so we were kind of like clashing in all of these conversations. And it's not that she didn't support me or believe in my idea. It's just that I wasn't communicating it in a way that was helpful to her. I mean, I'm sure you can relate because you do a lot with couples.
Well, I can relate because I'm married, Steve. How's that? And I think anyone, who is going through something like this, where you want something that's big and it's hard to communicate. It's interesting. I was talking to someone I'm very close to last night, and they were sharing something that they wanted and was struggling with. And I said, you just need to talk to your spouse about it. And they were like, oh boy, I don't see that going well. And so it's interesting. I can relate to exactly what you said. As a matter of fact, I kind of had flashbacks as you're sharing that story. Yeah, of these situations where you're like, oh man, I got this great idea, this brilliant, and I'm kind of wired differently than you. Rather than kind of being anxious, I just have these, I'm excited and I'm like, oh man, wait till I share this. And then it goes exactly how yours went. And it's like suddenly it turns into a big fight. Now I'm offended and I'm like, I mean, come on, that's great. Thanks for sharing that. Cause that's real. That's real talk, man. We're all dealing with that same thing.
Yeah. And it's like, well, then when the person who should be your biggest supporter and partner in this becomes your biggest enemy, now it just, it ramps up real quick. Cause it's like, now I'm not just annoyed or mad. I'm like, it's a core thing you're attacking. And so funny enough, like, I mean, you and I could go for hours about this too, but on a spiritual and relational level, these attempts to start this business were the biggest catalyst for me and Ashley growing in our marriage relationship and me growing spiritually as a person. And so it was like, whoa, I've seen it over and over when we would hit these roadblocks. Now I'm smart enough to look at it and go, okay, there's a lesson here. But at the time I was just mad. I'm like, what the heck? I'm trying to make this happen. And the people who should be helping me the most are my biggest impediments. Like,
Yeah, Steve, I want to make sure that I got to have you say what you just said again. I want to make sure I heard you correctly. That situation, the conflict, the struggle, you later realized was one of the biggest catalysts for growth in you and Ashley's relationship.
100%.
Wow. I mean, friends, if we could just pause right there, because here's the reality. I feel that exact same way. I mean, the level at which I resonate with that. And if Nikki was on the show, this is both of our podcasts, but if she was on the show, she would certainly give me a high five or maybe a punch in the nose. I don't know which it would be depending on the moment. But the reality is we've experienced those, and the encouragement to people is the struggle that you're facing, that you're in right now, that you feel like, when you describe this, you're on opposite sides of the table and suddenly you feel like enemies. That can be the biggest catalyst for growth in a relationship. Man, that's powerful stuff.
Let me just add there, because I think in a coaching situation, sometimes what you're talking about is I would ask yourself, if you're resonating with this, listening, ask yourself the question, like really, and you have to pause to do this, like pause and ask yourself, what am I noticing about myself right now in this struggle? Because what we tend to do is problem solve and focus on the problem and like trying to get through it. And we're just trying to survive, or we're just trying to get on solid ground. And there's something really powerful that happens when you go, okay, but what am I learning about myself in this? in you and I struggles, we didn't realize that till after the fact. But man, when you can realize it during the fact, sometimes it flips that struggle into more of a catalyst for growth. Because I think now I look back, and that's one of the coolest things. It forced me and Ashley to learn how to talk about hard things, and that's what we were worst at. So it forced us, because I was so passionate about starting this business that I was going to push through the hard. And yeah, I'm glad you paused on that, because I think that's like a really cool learning from it.
Steve, one of the core beliefs of Addicted to Betterment, we have 5 core beliefs that summarizes Addicted to Betterment, and one is that we believe your struggle can be your biggest catalyst for growth. A failure, we actually say your biggest failure can be the biggest catalyst for growth. And man, as you're talking, you are addicted to betterment, man. I mean, and we recognize that right on our first conversation. So
I want to plug that episode, because that if anyone hasn't listened, was it your first episode
that I did solo? Yeah.
Yeah, on the 5 principles. I thought that episode was so good.
Oh, thanks, man. Steve, your story is super inspiring. Thank you for sharing what's real there. So you and Ashley have the conversation, and you said, "Hey, I've got to make a change." So you're in the corporate job, you got the cushy salary, you're in the struggle. Man, I want more, and there isn't a person listening today that doesn't resonate with that. I feel like most of our society right now is feels like we're going through the motions, feeling mediocre in life, lacking purpose. And that's the word I heard you say, is purpose. So someone who's resonating with that, they do the work, they find their purpose, they have the conversation. So you had the conversation with Ashley, then what?
Yeah. Well, then it gets into some practical steps. So this can be helpful for people no matter where you're at, because also a lot of people get stuck on like, well, I haven't found the thing. And sometimes there might be a thing and there might not be for you. But either way, you don't have to get stuck and wait for a lightning bolt of clarity. Like, I found that one of the best steps to take that you can keep taking is have conversations with people. And then folks are like, well, what are we talking about? Like, just share what you're thinking, what you're hoping to do, what you'd love to get out of life and career, and just ask them for their advice. That's it. Ask them, what do you think? Because people love, and then they'll say, oh, I don't want to bother anyone. I don't want to inconvenience them. Like, no. People love to help and give advice. So it's like, just share and just say what it is. I mean, just name the thing. Be like, I'm kind of searching and asking some questions about what I want to do and be, and I'd love to get your thoughts on it. That's it. There's no other agenda. And as you have these conversations, we call them curious conversations, because you're just like being curious. It starts to kind of lay the path for you. It's like, you don't have to have it all figured out first. Other people will help you find your way. And that was definitely true for me. It was a series of all these conversations where they would be like, oh, you should check out this podcast, or you should meet so and so. And then one thing leads to another, and I'm like, oh, I'm learning about coaching, and I'm seeing like learning about business and meeting different people who can help. And then it, like, one day here I find myself like having the answer. It's not that I figured it out by myself. And I think those kind of conversations where you're okay not knowing, you're just being curious, people love to help, and it's a win-win. So I think that's one of the biggest things that helped me, and I continue to see it help others. But I'm curious if I mean, have you seen that too? Because I know your work has a lot of similarities.
It's interesting that you just asked me that, because I was actually thinking, dang, I can relate to exactly what he's saying. I recently was going through just a struggle, and feeling similar to what you were talking about I'm in the middle of a struggle. I'm trying to figure some stuff out. I'm looking for clarity, and purpose, and trying to figure out what that was. And in the course of conversations, just sitting down with people, seeking out the right people, making sure I was seeking out the right people was something I did. But sit down, and one in particular, person I respect and admire at the highest level, I asked to get on their calendar, said, I want to share some things that I'm working on and I want to get your opinion. And it's funny, so sit down and just sharing that and them really listening to hear. And then from that, some of the biggest and most exciting opportunities in my entire life from that conversation. If I had never shared what I was thinking and wanting to do, I would have still be just kind of in that same, hamster wheel of spinning and spinning and spinning and still in the same spot.
Well, and there's a good lesson there because you shared what you're looking to do, what you want. And I see people get in that trap too, where they're like, invite someone to a coffee meeting. They get there, they're just chatting. They feel nervous about like presenting an agenda. So they just chat and chat. And honestly, that's what's offensive to the other person because they're like, why are we here? What are we here to talk about? It's actually way more respectful and helpful if you tell them, like, this is what I want to get out of this conversation. And I've seen it so many times. I feel 100% confident about that. But I do think it's that law of attraction. Like you put it out there and opportunities start to come your way and open up.
Man, if we want to start talking law of attraction, that could be a big conversation. That's probably one of my favorite, literally one of my favorite topics. So,
oh, me too. We should do that. Okay, I got to tell this story then, because it's similar to yours. So, for 2 years before I left the corporate environment, my lifeline was listening to podcasts like this, like yours, and it just got me energized and gave me hope and a vision. And I was like, hey, I'm pushing paper all day, but at least this podcast is like getting me excited. And there was one called Eternal Leadership. I think they still do it, but it's definitely out there. And the host named John Ramstead, he was a coach. He previously was like ran like a financial services company. He had this crazy story where he almost died and just kind of like realized his purpose. And it was every episode he'd interview someone just like we're doing now, someone who was in business, entrepreneur, coach. And I was like, whoa, it was one of those things that was giving me a vision for, oh, I want to be like them. And, at the same time, I'm like, I had great leaders above me in the corporate setting. And I was like, I don't want to be like them. So this is starting to kind of suss out. Well, one day I had that little voice in my head, like, send an email to John Ramstead. I'm like, I've been listening to this guy every morning for 2 years. To me, he's famous. And he did have it was a big listener base on the podcast. But to me, I'm like, I can't just email a famous person. And I fought with that voice. And then I finally was like, okay, I'm going to do it. Just going to trust and take this step. And I sent the email. I was like, whatever, that'll never go anywhere. 15 minutes later, I checked my inbox and he had responded. And he was like, hey man, let's set up a call and talk. And I mean, you can imagine it's like pick your favorite celebrity. It's like they actually respond to you. It was crazy to me. So we set up a meeting. I'm like, this is insane, man. He basically became a mentor and taught me the first things I ever learned about starting and running a business. And he taught me how to get coaching clients and how to like set that up and make it successful. And to your point, it's like, well, I couldn't have planned that out, but putting it out there, I think when someone's like, oh, how did you go from, what you used to do to like running a successful business? Like it isn't one magic bullet. It's all the tiny little steps, and action brings clarity over time. You got to like take the steps over and over and take the little risks. And so I love your story, and it made me remember that one because, like, well, that was one of 1,000 things, but that was one.
Action brings clarity. Man, that's a great quote. Just do the next thing. When you launched your business, and I'm excited to get into that, I'm assuming that everything went perfectly, just as you planned, no curveballs, and it just jumped out to immediate success and has been that ever since. Am I wrong?
Exactly. No, there's nothing to share. It's so easy.
So tell me, I mean, tell me about the start. I mean, were there challenges? Were there setbacks? Were there moments that you doubted? And I'm like, what the hell have I done? Ashley's going to kill me and this is going to fail. Did you ever experience that?
Yes, many times. And I'll say that one of the steps that helped me to start, again, someone taught me this along the way, but there's an idea in culture that entrepreneurship is equivalent to jumping off the cliff. And people, you hear them use that term all the time, like, oh, I'm not ready to jump yet. And I actually believe the opposite is true. I think that entrepreneurship is one of the safest moves you can make if you do it the right way. And what I mean by the right way is what this mentor taught me, which was have some milestones. And so instead of jumping off with no idea what you want or where it's going to go, have a few, like, say, okay, I want to make this much money by X date, and work it back and have some check ins with yourself each month. Let me see, how is reality compared to where I wanted to be? Because where you have control as an entrepreneur is if it's not going according to plan, maybe I can pick up a side job or start Ubering, or like maybe I get to a point where it's really not working and I go back to the job I came from. You have the ability to pivot versus what everyone think is safe and secure in corporate America. You could get laid off tomorrow and you didn't even know it was coming. And so I actually think it's quite safe and secure if you just kind of plot out and have those check-ins. So you don't, it's not all or nothing. We make it this huge, like, it's either going to be a smashing success or fail completely and I'll be homeless on the streets. And it's like there's a huge middle ground of just being planful and checking in and being able to pivot along the way. So I mean, that's what I did. Like, I started this business, and coaching is a hard business to start. And then right when I started getting some success, COVID hit and we lost all our revenue. I mean, there were so many dips in the road, but along the way, I was able to pivot and make different decisions financially to kind of readjust course. And so it was never this all or nothing that people talk about it as. I think that was one of the biggest things that really helped make it more grounded, I guess.
So, what is greenhouse coaching? What is it? What do you do? What are you passionate about?
Yeah, so greenhouse coaching, we help people grow the life they want. And we do that through various coaching and experiences. So we work with individuals online and in person, and we work with teams and companies to build a great culture and leadership. And so it's a combination of, it's very similar to what you guys do with the life wheel. Like, instead of the parts of our lives competing against each other, we're trying to help people to make those areas of life work together. And a lot of times that starts with career or leadership, where we spend most of our day figuring out what are you good at, what do you love doing, how to align your job with that, how to grow in the right skills. And then really crafting a vision for the life you want, the career you want, and working back to, okay, what are the steps this week and next week that lead there? That was another part that really helped me with launching, was having a vision of what I want the company to be one day. It's like it pulls you through those hard times, because for me, I dream about having really great retreats that are just like unforgettable experiences. You get away from the day-to-day distractions, and you get to dream and breathe and be with other people. And the dream of that, the vision of that, like at the hardest times when there's no money and it doesn't seem like it's going to work, it just like that would pull me through, because I'm like, man, I just want that so bad. I can't wait to have that a reality. And I think, I don't know, it's like, it's my beef against business school too. No one teaches this. It's like, well, have a business plan, know how to make money. I'm like, what about the vision? Like, the vision to me is the cornerstone thing. So whether it's like a business startup or just someone's life and career and relationships, helping them have a vision and then work back from there is a lot of what we're trying to do.
Thank you for sharing that. That's awesome. It's so similar to Addicted to Betterment and People Forward Network, that is helping people live, a meaningful life, do meaningful work. Actually, I say it different: do meaningful work, live meaningful life. But you're just doing that at such a high level, and are obviously passionate about it. What is your worst, I'll call it, failure story? The one that you're like, man, really screwed this one up. And then after that, I'd like to hear your most proud success story that you've had in coaching.
Biggest failure coaching. This might not be the answer, but it's the first thing that came to mind. And it is related to launching a business. So I had heard a lot of advice that, like, come out of the gates, have like your prices set high and like believe in yourself and be confident that what you do is valuable. And so I remember the first time someone was really interested in coaching. And I mean, I had gone to coaching school and it was like, I was ready to do it. And I was definitely good at it. But I had the whole plan and I was like, this is what I want to be charging one day, which was something like $5,000 a month, to meet with me occasionally. And I know coaches who charge that and more, and it's well worth it. But I was coming out of the gate. And so I remember this guy being really excited and he's like, okay, what does it look like? What does it cost? And, I put those numbers on the table and I just remember him kind of like gently changing the topic and like ending the meeting. He's like, yeah, no. And it was such a good lesson too, because it was like, okay, yeah, there is something to like getting started and just getting momentum and building from there. Because then it felt like I don't know, I felt so ashamed or like such a hit then to try and lower my expectations from there versus getting started and growing up from there.
That's great, man. So share with me your favorite success story, the one you're most proud of.
Oh man, well, there's several like this now at this point, but there's one person in particular I was coaching who I guess you tend to love working with people who are on a similar path as you. And I think at first he was inspired by my story. He wanted to do something similar. And so coaching was really fun because I feel like, oh, I can help you. I know how this goes. And, it was like the first step was leaving a job that was just kind of sucking the soul, his soul dry. And then it was starting a business and like building a dream for that business and making it work. And we're doing like all these things that to me, it's not really about the business. It's the fact that the business gives him the freedom to create the life he wants. So we're structuring his time better. Like, well, what if you left for a month and traveled? That's a dream of yours. Like you can do that now. And I love, love, love those moments of, hey, you could do things that seemed like they weren't possible before. And so we're doing that. And then the moment that made it really a home run to me was I would love to coach people and also do things that didn't seem possible before. Like instead of rushing into a 1 hour Zoom call and then rushing out to the next meeting, I'd love to just like get on a plane and go somewhere crazy and like do our coaching session for the day. And so I haven't gotten there yet, but this person, we like went out to the mountains, did a hike, just like basically talked, even on the drive was great because we were unpacking his life story and like all the things he's done and experienced and struggles. And I'm just listening and getting to hear his story. But all the while, as the coach, like I'm connecting the dots and I'm like, oh, this is so clear. But, for so many of us, our story, we're in the weeds of it and he couldn't see it that clearly. So finally, later in the day, we're like, drinking some bourbon by the fire pit and he's just having like such clarity and breakthroughs about his new business and his life. And I basically got to then share back what I heard from that whole day of listening to his story. I was like, you have been all throughout all these experiences, you've been a guide to other people. And here's the ways how. And that's what you're meant to do, like 100%. You've always been that, and you naturally do it, and it helps people. And, it's like one of those moments, it just all clicked for him. He's like, holy, I've never noticed that. And so then the next day we got to weave it into some of his business plans and life goals. And it was just, I don't know, to me, that's the dream right there. It was really, really fulfilling.
That's awesome. So, Steve, you are a high energy guy. I have a question that's been forming in my mind this entire conversation. So, it's hard for me to imagine you being in a place or a role that sucks the life out of you, or a job that sucks the life out of you. Because every time I interact with you, man, your energy is super high, positivity super high, and it's infectious and it rubs off on me. So I'm thinking my favorite conversations that we have had that really moved me is how you see being a husband, being a father, being a man, around manhood and showing up as a man and doing that well. And man, those conversations that we've had around that, folks, friends, I wish we had another hour of the episode to talk about that. Well, that'll have to be another conversation. But I was thinking as you were talking about your journey from the corporate job that was unfulfilling, we'll call it that you had the gap, to what you do now that you're obviously passionate about and good at. Knowing you as a person and how you see showing up as a man, how much has you taking the jump and doing work that is fulfilling and that feeds that flame? How has that changed how you show up as a man, as a husband and a father?
Uh, like completely. Yeah. I mean, it's such a cool question because I think before it was hard to be my full self because we spend most of our waking hours at work. And for me, they were draining hours that were sucking the life out of me. So you're operating out of an empty tank. And I remember too, I mean, you and I share just kind of faith and spiritual life. I remember people just saying like, well, work isn't your purpose. And everyone's like puts too much stock and identity in their work. I'm like, yeah, I believe that too. I really do. But it seems to that stance seems too extreme for me. I'm like, then what about what you do all day? Like, seems like it matters where you spend, more than half of your life. And I remember wrestling with like, oh, maybe I should just bite the bullet and do work that I hate, but like make good money and help people as much as I can outside of that. And it just got to a point for me. It was like, not for me. Like for me, I have to do every day the stuff I'm made to do. And that is going to fill a lot of that tank so that I can be helping people. I've heard friends say like, oh, figuring out your purpose and that's so selfish. It's so like navel gazing and only us entitled people in the world get to even think about that. I'm like, sure, yeah, there are many people in history who've not had the chance to like pursue their dream job. And a lot of people right now as we speak who like they're just fighting to survive. But if you have the chance, like it actually is all about others. If you are pursuing the thing that you are made to do, it's actually a selfless thing that is going to help other people because you're going to be at your best. And I found that, yeah, as a man and as in my relationships in my family, I mean, I became such a better person in those arenas because I was operating with a full tank or at least a tank that was getting some fuel in it. And kind of fired up about being, doing the work I'm meant to do. And here's how I thought about it most days. When in my previous jobs, I would always be frustrated at the end of the day because I'm like, I'm exhausted and I don't even know what I accomplished today. And to me, one of the most fulfilling things in entrepreneurship is every night I actually know, even if it wasn't a great day, I still know what I got done that day. Like I know what I either finished, because anyone in corporate America knows you never finish anything. You just pivot a million times before you've ever started. But also now I know who I'm impacting and how I'm helping them. It's like, no, we helped these people and in these ways. And that the satisfaction from that, I just can't even describe. Like it's not on a day-to-day basis. It's not necessarily like the big, the big stuff that's so satisfying about it. It's like the fact that I know what I accomplished or who I helped.
So, Steve, before I wrap this up, I can't help but imagine how many people are listening to this driving down the road on the treadmill, or maybe they're at work in an unfulfilling job, but it can resonate with your story. I resonated with it for completely different reasons, but someone is in that place, and maybe it's a corporation that wants to have you work with their people, maybe it's an individual who is looking for this kind of help, what's something that you would tell them? Where would they start? What's the first action that they would take? Obviously, I would recommend them reach out to you. You can I'd love for you to share how to do that best, but what is some advice you would give people to take the first step?
Again, I'm a big believer in vision, and in terms of personality types, it's somewhere north of 90% of people, that's not their natural way, is to start with vision. So I think that's why it's such a powerful step, is most people need to tap into that intentionally. So intentionally take the step to write down in words on paper a vision of where you want to go, what you'd love life to look like. You know, you use you guys' life wheel as a framework, and just in each category, just write. There's something called hot pen. It's just like you write without stopping. And you just start writing like it's 2035. My life is perfect. Here's what it looks like. Boom. And then just start going Monday morning, Tuesday morning, like just write what it looks like, a day in the life, as if you're scripting a movie scene. Not bullet lists, but like prose. and and the reason that's so powerful is because we tend to, the second we have a dream, we discount it. We're like, yeah, that's not practical. That's not going to happen. And so if you write without stopping, you prevent yourself from shooting down your own dreams. And yeah, it really allows like those things that have been maybe stuffed down or suppressed or told that you were that they weren't realistic for all these years. It allows them to start coming back to the surface. And you just write. No one has to read it. You could burn the paper afterward, but like write, get it out of your system. And I think that's such a great starting point for wherever someone's at in this, take action journey.
I know you didn't get on the show to get clients. You said that very clearly to me, but I'm going to turn the tables on you a little bit. I can't help it. Some people are going to want to reach out to you. How do they do that?
I mean, our website, greenhousecoaching.co, is the easiest way. We're also everywhere on social media, but it's just like, shoot us a message, or you can find free tools there as well. But I think even if it's just one conversation with a coach, I think you're right. It helps you to move from stuck to enough clarity to get going.
Man, that's good. Steve, what I loved about our first conversation and just hearing you talk today, one, the authenticity. We see the Instagram story, we see the Facebook story, and we often think that's, oh, I can never get to that. But hearing the real talk, the real struggle, thank you for sharing that, because that relates. That relates to all of us. It relates to me. It relates to every listener. What I heard you say today, it challenged me. And friends, I want to encourage you. If you're listening and you can relate to that empty feeling, that feeling that Steve is describing of, man, I got more, I want more. And that feeling of leaving with your tank empty and showing up with an empty tank in other areas of your life. Here are the steps that I heard Steve say. One, find your purpose. I love what you said about just writing that down. That's awesome. Find out what it is that drives your emotions. What is it that you get fired up about, passionate about? Seek out a mentor, a coach. You did that, and you talked about how life-changing that was. And I can't help but think, as I'm sitting here talking to you today and feeling the emotion and just the realness in which you speak, that, man, if it hadn't been for that guy you were sitting and talking to who said, hey, what if you helped your closest loved ones find out what they're, and you got emotional in that conversation, man, what maybe wouldn't have happened if you hadn't had that mentor, So find purpose, find a mentor, set goals, write them out, set those milestone goals that Steve talked about, and then be accountable for yourself. You talked about checking in with yourself and being accountable to hitting those metrics that you set for yourself. Friends, this is powerful stuff. Steve, thanks for sharing your story with us today. It inspired me again. So thank you, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me on. And I just definitely want to say to anyone that's still listening at this point, like, it is possible. Whatever you're dreaming about, whatever's next, I know that it feels many times like it's impossible. It won't happen. It can't happen. And I'm here to tell you, like, it is possible. And it's like, that's what you're made for. So go for it.
So you just listened to this episode. Now, join us in being addicted to betterment. Please subscribe to the show, share with your friends, tag us, and please take a moment, leave a review. Yeah, we do want your stars, but we really want the feedback.